In the shadowed heart of Appalachia, where the mountains claw at the sky and the trees whisper secrets older than time, there lived a man named Elias Crowe. He was a wiry figure, all sinew and bone, with eyes like chipped flint that seemed to see through the world rather than into it. Folks in the holler didn't talk much about Elias, not because they didn't know him, but because saying his name felt like inviting something unwholesome to listen. Elias lived in a cabin perched on a ridge so steep the wind itself seemed afraid to linger. The place was a ruin of gray wood and rusted nails, its windows dark as if they'd swallowed the light long ago. No one knew how he survived up there. No garden, no livestock, no sign of a hunt. Yet every dusk, he'd shuffle down the mountain, a burlap sack slung over his shoulder, its bottom stained with something wet and dark. He'd vanish into the mist that clung to the pines, and by dawn, he'd be back, sack empty, his hands trembling just a touch. The story started when a boy named Caleb, too brave for his 11 years, swore he'd find out what Elias did in the dark. His pa told him to leave it be, that some men were better left to their shadows. But Caleb's curiosity was a live thing, gnawing at him. One night, with the moon hanging low and yellow, he crept up the ridge, barefoot to keep quiet, his breath fogging in the chill. He found Elias by a creek, knelt over something Caleb couldn't quite make out, a shape too big to be a deer, too still to be alive. The air smelled wrong, like damp earth and copper, and Elias was humming, a low, tuneless drone that made Caleb's teeth ache. The sack lay open beside him, and from it spilled things that glinted in the moonlight. A rusted watch, a child's shoe, a tangle of hair still clinging to a scrap of scalp. Caleb's stomach lurched, but before he could run, Elias turned, his flinty eyes locking onto the boy like he'd known he was there all along. "You shouldn't look where the light don't go," Elias rasped, his voice like gravel sliding down a slope. He stood, slow and deliberate, and Caleb saw what he'd been working on. A body, or what was left of it, skin peeled back in neat strips, bones gleaming wet. It wasn't animal. It wore a flannel shirt, torn and blood-soaked, the kind Caleb's uncle wore when he went missing last spring. Caleb ran, feet pounding the earth, branches clawing at his face. He didn't stop until he was under his own quilt, shaking, the hum still echoing in his skull. He told no one, not his pa, not the preacher, because he knew they'd never find Elias. The cabin would be empty by morning, the creek running clear, the sack gone like it had never been. But the next night, Caleb heard it, a soft tap at his window. Then another. He peeked through the crack in the shutters and saw Elias standing in the yard, sack over his shoulder, staring up with those dead eyes. The humming started again, louder now, and Caleb realized it wasn't coming from Elias. It was coming from the sack. Something inside it was alive, and it knew his name. By morning, Caleb was gone. The folks in the holler didn't search long. They knew the mountains took what they wanted. And up on the ridge, Elias Crowe sat in his cabin, whittling a stick into something sharp, waiting for the next dusk to